I could never forget the first time I've watched nekojiru. This strange movie, nearly devoid of any dialogue, but absolutely dripping with style. Its mere 33 minutes runtime anchored itself so deeply into my subconscious, it's almost painful. The beautifully executed animation on display will forever remain intertwined in my thoughts with this deep formative memory of lounging on a bed that was getting just a little too short for growing legs, the sweltering heatwave of a summer spent without AC, sniffly from the back-to-back emotional roller coasters of subjecting myself to endless troves of the weirdest and confusingly melancholiest of art. All of this at the break of dawn, in hopes of just feeling something. I was an extreme shut-in back then, and didn't have any friends. So at the time, my daily routine consisted of living almost exclusively at night, playing the same couple of video games to sheer exhaustion, barely eating, and then trying my best to cure insomnia in the hopes of one day being able to catch more than 4 hours of sleep. The only saving grace to this absolutely mind-crushing grind being the late hours at night, early morning. A quiet respite where that bit of silence, accompanied by a moonlit sky, was enough to ease the static occupying my brain. Yet despite actual, factual, thousands of hours dedicated solely to submerging myself in the most obscure, seminal, and transgressive stuff my grubby teenager hands could find online, there must have been a reason why out of all the artists out there, Nekojiru and her creations would be one of the few practically dancing around my frontal cortex. Her stylistic proclivities, artistic sensibilities, and sheer level of identity on display managed to resonate so deeply with me that her entire body of work now feels intrinsic to my personhood. For the longest time, I wasn't even sure why I vibed so much with her stuff, but I would still find myself circling back to it, somehow, someway. Year after year, without missing a beat, her projects became more and more ingrained in me, as this important reminder of my enthusiasm for many artistic mediums. A rewatch of the movie here, the show's entire run there, and then rereading the same couple of volumes I've read all over again. Despite this incessant cycle repeating itself for practically as long as I've been online, I still haven't managed to put the pieces of the puzzle together as to why a small series revolving around two little cats who spend the great majority of their time wandering dark streets far from home, causing all sorts of mischief, and sometimes outright heinous acts, has managed to land so heavily with me in all of its transgressive and violent nature. Though maybe having waited to have the exact perfect words to describe these feelings would lead to me just never saying anything at all. Over time, I found that whenever that sort of art hits me hard in the heart, I no longer feel like I can allow myself to just stew on those thoughts in silence like I probably would have before. Nowadays, as a shut-in with marginally more free time and an actual outlet for my hyperfixation in the form of a YouTube channel with a non-insignificant number of people watching my insane ramblings, I kinda started valuing the idea of getting my words, my own perspective out there. While it's easy to fall for the idea that everything's already been said before, especially with topics as beloved as Nekojiru's mangas, the more I write my thoughts and say them out loud, the more I realize that sentiment's hella far from true. Everybody's got a different, very unique point of view regarding the art we each hold dear. After all, what's a video if not a window into someone's very own soul? You leave stuff out there and hope folks pick up on it, you know? And following in the footsteps of last vid essentially being this giant appeal for everyone to let loose creatively, it felt as if it was my solemn duty to give in to self-indulgence and to finally talk about Nekojiru, its creator, and what her entire body of work represented to me growing up. In the end, what I'm hoping to put out there is some sort of conversation between myself and the many projects she's made over the course of her life. I'm a lot less interested in the semantics of listing off her entire bibliography, or criticizing how her books read, or how they look, despite really loving her art style without a shred of irony in saying so. This isn't a review or video essay. None of my shit is, so don't go taking this as some sort of quote-unquote complete, all-encompassing retrospective of everything she's put out there. I'll definitely touch on a lot of it, but for all intent and purposes, it'd be way too generic of a thing to make. I just find it a lot more prescient to talk candidly about how a piece of art made me feel, how it resonated with me on an emotional level. And talking about that sort of stuff kinda helps in parsing those feelings and figuring out what the work themselves instilled and stirred within. I want to show the world the passion of an artist whose fingerprints can still be felt on her medium to this very day, and how that, in turn, inspired me to create. With that being said, it's important to note that some of the topics I'm gonna approach here can get pretty uncomfortable. It's gonna get really fucking heavy by the end, but I think it's in my interest to keep all of this stuff present and not try to smooth over any bumps. Sometimes that sort of feeling, of discussion, is important to talk about, you know? So first things first, Nekojiru as we know it is the brainchild of two separate artists, Chiyomi Hachiguchi and her husband Hajime Yamano. The two of them worked intensively on pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about here. So much so, in fact, that there doesn't seem to be a clear delineation as to where one starts and the other ends. Both's involvements have always been left fairly unclear to the general public, but a rough approximate of what we know is that Chiyomi generally thought of the plot and the overall ideas, while Yamano was a lot more hands-on on the art itself. That information though is only really what we can glean through interviews and hearsay, so make of that what you will. For the sake of simplicity, I'll continue to use the name Nekojiru to simply address Chiyomi, since for one, that's the pen name she actively used for all of her work, and for two, because her involvement is a big part of what originally drew me to her art. The sheer amount of personality she suffused into each and every page was enough to sell me on the entire experience. Not to discredit Yamano's work here, God fucking knows the dude's incredibly talented as well, but you can kinda tell in some spots when he's on board versus when he isn't. The lines are smoother, the faces are a little rounder, and the style looks more refined. Not better per se, but with designs that feel a whole lot more on model compared to Nekojiru's earlier squiggly lines. His later stuff, actively signed under the name Nekojiru Y, feels a lot closer to an iteration on Nekojiru's original art style, like a step forward into his own direction, kind of the closest thing you can get to a pure extension of it. For lack of a better term, I find it more organized, more sanitized if you get what I mean. Which to me feels a little different than the usual chaotic spirit Nekojiru's work embodies all the way through. From storyline to character design, settings to ideas, the general vibe I get from her mangas is one of embracing your own unbridled stream of consciousness. Ironically, something I'm a lot more conscious about nowadays, as I tend to write pieces that are a lot more emotion-brained than brain-powered. Like the act of it, not the anime. That kinda looks like a fun time, gonna have to talk about it someday. In a way, it's as if her stories outright refuse or even defy conventional analysis, let alone mass market appeal. They don't need rhyme or reason, they just need to be felt deep inside. As someone who tends to naturally gravitate to obsession when it comes to the art I enjoy, I find myself overly reading and rereading stuff, ruminating on that shit in hopes of getting a better overall understanding of what it means, what it could have potentially meant to the author, what they wanted to say. Nekojiru's stories and all of their slapdash approach to inner cognitive dissonance almost raises its middle finger to me, the reader, as if to say, how fucking dare you try to assign some form of greater existential theme to this? And in some way, I really vibe with that. Not to say there's nothing to learn from them, quite the opposite in fact, but what's there to learn is so primeval in its essence that you tend to absorb it through sheer osmosis. You pick up the comic, flip through its pages, and you kinda just get it. Simple as. The great majority of Nekojiru's mangas are admittedly fairly one-note. Two protags, whether that be big sister Nyako and little brother Nyata going out to spend time together, God's duo of angels sent to Earth to help mankind, or even more pairs of cats trading places every now and then. They always end up going somewhere, meeting someone new, seeing something weird, or just fucking some shit up on the way there. Though most likely a good combo of each of these. Their unblinking eyes and uncanny smiles just staring ahead. In some way, it's almost hard to get a general vibe check on the whole deal. Like, are you supposed to laugh at the strange circumstances of each scenario? Are you supposed to feel weird about them? Are you supposed to cry? Who knows? And honestly, that doesn't really matter all that much. You just experience those little tales, and when you're done, you just move on to the next one. It's simple, but it works every time. And in that sort of simplicity hides a very multifaceted approach to storytelling. The art style itself is very stripped down, nearly taken to the extremes of its bare components, yet it still manages to carry a certain elegance to it, this very special charm. And I legit think there's a lot of joy in seeing that sort of approach to drawing. Each line, bump, or imperfection created by those unsteady hands helped the work graft itself into my memory, and in turn turned the work into something truly human. It's a weird feeling to describe without inherently devolving into creative philosophies, but it's such a big quality that I look for in pretty much anything I smoke. Which I mean, I guess that's not coming off as much of a surprise, as someone constantly championing the weirdest and nichest of stuff. Sometimes almost to a contrarian level of enthusiasm, but you know. I can't help but gravitate towards any sort of art that feels iconoclastic. The good stuff where you can tell yourself nothing else really feels quite like it. You can feel their identity from a single glance. Each respective work, each art style feeling like a true extension of the artist at hand, rather than something meticulously calculated to appease as many eyes as possible. There's so much fun and individuality to be found in that shit. Plus, since Nekojiru started publishing her works as part of Garo, the avant-garde comic magazine, you can see there's a similar sort of mindset attached to the whole scene. This sort of free spirit of indie creation coming from a looser set of restrictions of what you can or can't do. It's really cool, and part of why I resonate so much with her work. Though, to be honest, I don't think labeling her stuff, or trying to create a narrative where I'd frame her art as an extension of that very same scene, or its lineage, would do any justice to either sides, whether they be the comparer or comparee. Those aren't real words, but you get what I mean, right? Even the closest folks from that circle operated in wildly different ways from each other, and honestly, good for them. You can tell that Nekojiru's vibes clash with the surrounding Gekiga and Eta Uma style the magazine was known for at the time, in this really interesting way, mind you. Like take for example her debut work, Nekojiru Udon. This very short story where a mother cat arrives at an udon shop with her kitten clutched in her mouth. She confused the place for a hospital and demands the owner to neuter her child because the poor kid just meows too much at night and she can't get some sleep. At first, the shop owner is kinda taken aback, and rightfully so. But through the sheer insistence of that helpless mother, he eventually relents and actually decides to perform the operation himself. Completely unprepared for a procedure like that, the dude just skewers the shit out of that kitten's balls, effectively killing him in the process. This extremely weird scenario increasingly gets weirder as another customer arrives, only for them to do the exact thing that would make sense right now. Order cat soup udon. Naturally, the cook just gets back to work as if nothing happened. No anger, no sadness, no grand payoff in the form of a wacky punchline, just complete emotional cognito hazard. I really fuck with it. It's not often you get blasted with that sort of storytelling in manga, at least not presented in that way. To have the situation unfold as is incredibly powerful of a statement to make as your very first gig in the industry. Every one of Nekojiru's mangas hinges on that sense of surrealism. Each story concerned with relatively mundane events, but always taking a turn for the strange and stranger. And most of the time, they'll straight up become hella violent in how they choose to portray this seemingly random cruelty. Actively making the conscious choice to show you protagonists that are nearly amoral characters, devoid of any sort of logic, or even any real murderous intent. Like none of them are going out of their way to do this shit. Well, except that one. The rest just be like that. It's gotten to the point where when most folks think of Nekojiru, they probably think fucked up things happening around two cute little cats. And honestly, I wouldn't blame them. Though I promise, it's a little deeper than that. Well, maybe. Not every story is concerned about pushing the limits of what can be actively shown in print form. There's ero manga for that. A lot of them are fairly esoteric, and tend to just detail the lives of whoever's in the limelight at that time. I mean yeah, Nyako and Nyata will bully a dog to death with spears, but, you know, they also tend to just hang out and have their own little weird shenanigans. Oh, poor little guy lost an arm. Like that one chapter where Nyata has to retrieve his sister's soul that was split in half through some really fever dream-esque imagery going on. No matter the volume or chapter, it's like Nekojiru is more concerned in presenting you anything happening at any moment, rather than a cascade of increasingly intertwined storylines and plot beats. As if to say that the world's just like that sometimes. Short, long, funny, uncanny, but all of it unpredictable to the very end. Truth be told, trying to sell you this artist's entire body of work under the premise of, oh my god, look how fucked up this comic is, would be oddly demeaning to its sense of artistry. It's defo how it was sold to me many years ago, but I feel like that's more endemic of the landscape that was perpetrating said cliches when describing fairly transgressive art. Cause let's be real, 99% of the time folks whip out that sentence, it kinda ends up being used to describe the tamest shit ever. I think what I personally take out of its more grotesque aspect is that children kinda do fucked up things sometimes, without any real meaning or understanding behind it, as messed up as that might sound. On top of that, I feel like the juxtaposition of cruelty with those fairly cutesy looking designs just hits somewhere special. Like the halfway point between a children's book and Suehiro Marua's stuff. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of Nekojiru's stories take place in towns that seem pulled straight out of mid to late Showa era Japan, so like 60s, maybe 70s. It manages to convey a certain sense of nostalgia that you typically see in media tied to childhood. Think of stuff like the Boku no Natsuyasumi line of games, or Chibi Maruko-chan. While all fine by themselves, a lot of those stories kinda teeter on the edge of feeling like a bunch of now aging adults looking back at their past and rubbing their chins quietly going, ah, the good old days of being 6 years old in the countryside. Which I mean, totally fair for them, but like, it's cool that not everything has to fall under the same rules, you know? Not every childhood is this grand idyllic thing. Sometimes they're pretty shitty, and all you can do is look back in hindsight and try to find the little bits of joy left in the carnage. In a way, Nekojiru's work almost feels like this deliberate twist on the concept, this subversion of that very same childhood nostalgia. No more are you looking at all the wonders of being a child. Instead, you're presented by crude and rude little fellas going around doing whatever the fuck they want, with much disregard to anyone who tries to get in their way. Like, the entire series of Nekogami-sama is notable for that, because it basically operates under the premise of, what if angels were actually little shitheads? Which I personally find really neat. They'll fuck with humans on purpose, or get in trouble with God, and it leads to a lot of fun scenarios. The stories are all very idealistic in a relatively fantastic way, but still stay grounded by rules like, if someone gets stabbed, they'll probably bleed to death. I remember reading an article a while back, claiming that this sort of story, especially ones choosing to delve into darker, more serious topics, were derived solely from folks with innate sadistic pleasure. I don't really need to explain to you in detail why that idea is not only extremely harmful for the state of art as a whole, but is also incredibly bullshit. Like, what an insanely reductive statement to make. It's no secret that alternate manga, erogura artists, and pretty much anyone trying to convey more sensitive topics in their work can end up getting the short end of the stick real fast. There's a certain phenomenon of overcorrecting art that is deemed quote-unquote problematic, and that's something I don't really fuck with. I'm not talking about shit like bigotry or harmful rhetorics that clearly shouldn't have its place, but like, when it comes down to stories that touch on the more sensitive human aspects, it's weird to see folks immediately try to point fingers. Cause really, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong about wanting to showcase a plethora of emotions, however complex they might be. Each of them has their rightful place in art, even the relatively fucked up ones. So I can't really fault Nekojiru for wanting to tell stories about relatively bleak shit. As a matter of fact, I'm fucking glad she did. The whole thing reeks of that style of dark comedy, low-key edgy but never in a chuddy way. It's done completely on purpose, and even if it wasn't, it's still very important stuff to talk about. The way it handles as many goofs and gaffes of the homies as the pretty heavy stuff is generally honorable in my opinion, especially since all that shit's only ever separated by a couple of pages at most. Like, there's this one story about insects going on a trial, with Nyako and Yata acting as sort of executioners. And while it's all fun and games at first glance, they don't hesitate to hit you with that real shit halfway through. The insects are all sentenced to death. No questions asked, no objections accepted. When Nyako and Yata eventually leave to get a snack, you even get some bugs trying to bounce, clearly aware that this isn't going anywhere, at least not in their favor. Yet through the words of a wise elder, they end up getting convinced to stay here, only to get sentenced to death right after the cats come back. The entire premise of a group of people clinging to the idea of a rightful justice system, or being able to stop this massacre with words alone, even when they're basically being paraded to their own demise, is still incredibly prescient to this day. It doesn't really matter if you can defend your cause against an enemy that just wants you gone, no matter how justified you might be. The result will always end up being the same in a world that clearly lacks that sense of justice. Despite the layer of surrealism and child-friendly aesthetic wrapping the whole thing together, Nekojiru's world holds a certain conversation between itself and our actual factual reality. Choosing to show the world as something truly rotten in this very immoral way might be a bit too on the nose for some, but it very much coincides with how it feels most of the time, even if in this case it's taken to extreme levels of parody. Though, truth be told, I don't really subscribe to the idea that all of her work comes from a place of nihilism or general apathy, at least not entirely so. While Nekojiru's art definitely touches on those ideas, and quite often mind you, I think a huge part as to why it hits so hard has to be entirely attributed to how it's looking at you in this very tongue-in-cheek attitude like, hey, isn't it funny how the world's fucked up sometimes? It feels almost humbling if you get what I mean. Even though there's a veneer of artificiality in its cute art style, oftentimes not taking itself too seriously, there's still stuff in each of those books that come to hit you in the face at 100 miles an hour when you least expect it. Almost as if that facet of the real world was constantly peeking through each page, acting as this sort of grounding back-to-earth reminder. Nekojiru's art embodies honesty almost to a fault, especially in how she chooses to portray the world according to her particular perspective of it. Folks are sometimes drawn as weird, ugly, or sometimes outright deranged looking. But in a way, that's kinda how it goes down in real life too. People aren't all tall bishi boys and supermodels. That conscious choice to show people in this way, almost bereft of filter, was in and of itself such a massive part as to why I fuck with her art so much. People describe her art style as abuna kawaii, as in the combination of the Japanese words for dangerous and cute respectively. And even though I find the term kinda lame used in that way, mostly because it led to her art being seen as more of a cool, sad girl anime aesthetic to achieve, rather than genuinely great stories to engage with, it's kinda impossible to deny that the art on display defo fits that sort of vibe. That idea of juxtaposing children characters doing all sorts of fucked up stuff on the daily. Though I feel like looking at it as just that feels almost like a disservice to the art itself. You know what's not a disservice though? Nyata's ever-changing proportions, going from the rough estimate of what a child size might be to straight up actual kitten size. It just never stops being funny to me. Like there's this chapter in the second volume of Nekojiru Udon that has him on the table eating from a bowl, and it's legit the cutest shit ever. It's easy to forget that Nekojiru's work is also deeply comedic by nature, and one of the shining examples of that lies in the next logical step. You gotta animate those little fuckers. A lot of people talk about the Catsup OVA as Nekojiru's only foray into animation. But did you know Nyako and Nyata got their actual true television debut just a few years prior to that? Yeah, Nekojiru Gekijo Jiru Original. Absolute mouthful of a title, but also colloquially known as Nekojiru Theater, is a series of 27 animated shorts spanning from about 1 to 2 minutes each. The show aired from July 1999 to October of the same year on TV Hasai network show Bakusho Mondai Boss Kara O, or Bakusho Mondai's King Boss Character Program. If you're not familiar with Bakusho Mondai, which, let's be fair, that's like 90% of us here, they're a Japanese comedy duo mostly known for doing a whole Boketsukomi routine, who also apparently hosted a fuck ton of variety shows and the likes. I'm not super familiar with them and their forays into the broader entertainment sphere, at least not that side of it, but what I do know about them is their involvement with Nintendo's Satellaview. You know that whole proto-streaming attachment to the Super Famicom that basically allowed folks to download games, magazines, and all sorts of cool stuff through satellite broadcast? And all that being done years before the Dreamcast too? That fucking thing made Nintendo ooze so much money, dog. Maybe not enough. Anyway, real cool shit. Going back to Nekojiru though, 4 of the show's episodes were left unaired until the DVD's release, which, let's be real, didn't sell all that much either. Nowadays, you don't tend to hear many folks talk about it. The thing's fairly obscure, at least for people who aren't particularly familiar with everything Nekojiru's touched on. And honestly, that's such a massive shame, since the show's really good at what it does. Gekijo Jiru doesn't really have any huge narrative, or even overarching story. It's this pure distillation of Nekojiru's tales in compilation form. Think the mangas, but animated, like quite literally one-to-one retelling sometimes. So much so in fact, that each episode seems to be adapting chapters wholesale. It's still drenched to shit with the same dark humor you'd expect throughout the whole run, though this time with a tonal shift being even more blatant in illustrating the balance between the funny and the bleak. And legit, the whole show manages to carry on so much of that same insolent ass energy the manga's got going, just this time in broad Technicolor vision. You know, despite each episode channeling the same sort of hyper-violent, cartoony logic, its dry and sardonic, straight-to-the-point style of humor feels almost amplified tenfold compared to its source material. On my last 2 rewatches, I found myself having to physically stop taking notes because I was cracking up too much, which I don't know what that says about me, but fuck it, we take it. Also, small detail, but something really cute is that just like the manga, each episode's title retains the tradition of being named after food items. When it comes to the animation itself, it's kinda what you expect out of that sort of adaptation. Very much your standard low-budge, low-movement animatic shit. And even though that ain't much to write home about by itself, it still manages to hit. The lack of fancy movement ends up feeling so close to the way Nekojiru presented her work in traditional form. Very homemade feel, with the best of anti-professionalism energy, just how I like to see it. The backgrounds also go mad wild with these cool patterns and gradients interspliced in the mix, really giving off the vibe of anything goes through those really colorful additions, making the show feels almost mixed media-esque. Same for the OST, which absolutely blasts with some Aphex Twinny feeling tracks here and there. The still as fuck imagery feels always complemented somehow, through both the usage of those digitally encrusted, psychedelic feeling backgrounds, and the fancy tunes banging along the way. You find yourself in this weird spot where the vibes both align and clash really hard at the same time. But honestly, it works really well considering who we're talking about here. To no surprise whatsoever, the show is filled to the absolute brim with the same sort of mood as what it's adapting from. The first episode is straight up about how in this world, pigs aren't considered people. So let me say with all of my chest that it doesn't lose the edge of its social commentary. That's one thing for sure. Like right after gutting one of the pigs Nyako and Nyata's parents own, they cook it up and make its little sibling eat it tonkatsu style, all while its parents are fucking in the background. Or the episode where they bully a pig and a cop shows up last minute only to dismissively say that it didn't matter because it was just a pig. Not only incredibly irreverent in its humor, but also probably the most accurate portrayal of a cop out there next to Earthbound. The comedy is legit so fucking funny too, especially with how the voice actors convey that sort of bancho-ass attitude both Nyako and Nyata have. They're so ungrateful and shitty and fun to follow because they have absolutely zero filter when talking to other people. The dinner scene at the aunt's place rings especially true with how they won't even hesitate a second before telling her to her face that the food tastes like ass. Also, hearing Nyata's little nya every episode is almost enough to kick in the little bit of maternal instincts I'd have if I was slightly better adjusted. There's even an entire episode centered around his very first word, which just so happens to be stupid, because that's something he hears all the time at home. It's so fucking cute, like, oh my god man, he's so moe, it's unbelievable. I want to see him fuck shit up something fierce. You know, with all that being said, I really wish I had more substantial stuff to say about Gekijo Jiru beyond that, but finding pretty much any information on it has been kind of a pain in the ass throughout this whole research process. The show's history isn't particularly well documented beyond like stuff you would expect out of my anime list, shit like basic credit listings, and those have the biggest tendency to lead into major dead ends. What I've been able to gather through all of this is only really tangential in nature. Apparently this was produced by the folks at Japan Home Video. You're gonna have to forgive the extremely generic name here, but they're the same producer behind some really gnarly late 80s to early 90s OVAs. Shit like Cyber City Oedo 808, Wicked City, the duology of extremely graphic Violence Jack movies, and of course, A Wind Named Amnesia. That last one I'm only really name dropping here because it shares the same director as one of my absolute favorite pieces of animation to ever exist, the incredibly beautiful adaptation of Mamoru Nagano's 5-star stories. Contrastingly, the animation for Nekojiru Gekijo Jiru was helmed by a studio called Kent House. I couldn't really find any tangible information about them, but what I did find was the director and art director respectively. Hiroshi Fukutomi, coming from all sorts of gigs, whether that be episode director or storyboard artist on Lupin III, Legend of the Galactic Heroes, or even XXX Alec out of all things, as well as Yoji Nakaza, usually known for his background artwork in projects like Aika, Jinro, and Gunsmith Cats. This, of course, is only really a small sample of what they each worked on, but you get the picture, right? It's not like I even expected to see familiar faces in an obscure adaptation of an even more obscure manga. Though I hope that after this video, some of you will pick it up. It's so much fun that I feel you should just go and watch it by yourself. Like the whole thing tops off at a rough 37-minute runtime, so it's not like it's this huge time sink or anything. It feels like the perfect group watch length and legit comes at the highest of my recommendations. While we're fresh off the topic of wild adaptations, did you know Nekojiru's stories also got the whole multimedia treatment? While I was looking for stuff relating to this video a few months ago, I found out about these. Well, they're freely available on archive.org, courtesy of some very nice folks who thought about uploading them, but yeah, straight up CD-ROM based games. Well, I call them games, but realistically they fall a lot closer to the broad umbrella term of activity centers. That sort of cool little techno gadget you can fuck with rather than anything traditionally envisioned as game-centric and all, but you get what I mean. It's not like I'm exactly preoccupied by what quantifies as a game or not, that shit's nerdy. These end up feeling a lot less like interactive CD-ROM experiences, like Chutang or the shit ton of stuff produced by musical artists in the late 90s, early aughts, and a lot more like desktop widgets, stuff like Shimejis but more retro. It's been really fun learning about them. Like there's this one that allows you to put Nekojiru themed frames on your pictures, and since the person who uploaded it also took the time and effort to extract all of its images, you can basically use them without having to run the software itself. Mostly saying that because running those on modern hardware, specifically with the intent of recording them in high quality, was kind of a crapshoot for me, which totally explains the screenshot of vision you're seeing right now, but you're gonna have to trust me when I say, each and every one of them absolutely owns. Especially the ones that take care in remaking certain stories, but this time in 3D CG omake form. As an enthusiast of all sorts of fucked up 3D art, this really warms my heart. The character models always looking just a little off makes the whole deal a lot more charming. And that's not even considering the Nekojiru Udon 2 CD, with its preview screenshot of a billboard looking straight out of Garage Bad Dream Adventure. Big vibe city here. In a way, that sort of multimedia project reminds me of a similar one that was made to retell the story of Suehiro Maruo's Shoujo Tsubaki, but in digital format. And I have to look at that one, but that's defo for another day. Something I kept thinking about during the last few months while rereading extensively Nekojiru's bibliography was that most folks nowadays, at least a large portion of overseas fans, seem to only remember her from the Catsup movie exclusively, rather than the insane amount of cool stuff she's touched upon. And for a while, I kinda stopped and wondered why though. Like clearly, Nekojiru's impact on Japanese pop culture was pretty fucking big, and she was really popular over there in the late 90s, early 2000s. Multiple books, adaptations, multimedia projects, a whole lot of merch, like an ungodly amount of adorable marketable plushies and collectible figures, all of which cost an absolute fucking arm and a leg to get even secondhand. On top of that, at the very height of her popularity, she got to collaborate with a very unlikely sponsor. Fucking Tokyo Electric Power Company for some reason, where she designed a whole ass mascot for them. This little guy called Denki-kun. Said little man only really appeared in like one commercial in '97, but forever will he grace our collective memories with his kind words of wisdom. Denki-kun desu. Wonderful. Nekojiru's influence ranged pretty far and wide. Like, did you know that word of God dictates that Yoshihiro Togashi of Yu Yu Hakusho fame based his Hunter x Hunter character Illumi on Nekojiru's designs? A little obvious judging by the eyes and the overall attitude, but it's still really cool to get an actual confirmation on that. Same thing for Pani Pony Dash, who constantly brings up this funky little cat very reminiscent of the ones we're used to. I've heard people compare it to Chiyo's dad from Azumanga Daioh, and like, I can totally see the resemblance because of the eyes, but also, I'm not crazy here, right? That's straight up Nekojiru. Even down to the whole godly job assignment, randomly showing up to fuck with humans, and even being called Nekogami-sama in its original language. Really cool addition to be honest, and one I really didn't expect. Though speaking of Pani Pony, the background characters in that show have such an aim for the ace vibe, except instead of faceless androgynous Slendermans, here you get these really weird primordial feeling 3D models, just statically staring while the world moves around them. The whole show's got such a good vibe. I guess that's a bit obvious to say, knowing the animation comes from that 2005 pre-Hidamari sketch, pre-Sayonara Zetsubu Sensei studio shaft, carrying the atmosphere bigly with a world that feels insanely maximalist in its desire to use every color at all times. I've only watched a bit of the show for this vid, but really fun time. But yeah, all this to say, the easy answer as to why Nekojiru's art is still relatively underground despite being extremely well loved by her fans is that a large portion of her work was just untranslated for years. And it's not like that stuff was all that easy to get a hold of already. So, yep. I know, real anticlimactic, but sometimes it'd just be simple like that. It's only really in the recent years that we've seen a consolidated effort in getting better scans uploaded online, and active fan translation efforts. Which, by the way, fastest way to catch up on learning pretty much any language is to hyper-obsess over an artist, so much so that you feel the desire, no, the actual need, to read everything they've worked on, including the untranslated stuff. Not exactly ideal circumstances for a first read, all things considered, but I don't know. It kinda felt special to undertake that sort of journey. Plus, what I didn't get to this time around is always there for the future. Like there's a couple of books I just couldn't find online entirely, no scans whatsoever, not even raws. And in a way, it almost makes me feel glad to know there's still stuff out there that I've yet to immerse myself in. Very much something to look forward to someday. Also, want to give a quick shout out to Read Nekojiru and Daily Nekojiru respectively. They're both on Twitter, but it's their fan sites I really want to highlight here. Both are going to be linked in the description below. They're extensively and incredibly well researched, and you can really tell they've poured a lot of love and genuine care into what they do. It takes about 5 seconds out of this vid to thank them, because I'm willing to go as far as to say that about 90% of what's available of Nekojiru's work online to this day is neatly categorized on each of their sites. Whether that be high quality scans or English fan translations, it's gotta be attributed to their incredibly selfless and generous work. Funny side note on the topic of translation though, I couldn't find any other spot to mention this, but I found myself in the possession of the French edition of Nekojiru Manju, one of the later entries I was spotting for this vid. The only non-raw version I could find, and Not gonna lie, I high-key feel really blessed with this one. For once, my ability to read and comprehend this absolutely masochistic language serves more than just getting around at the grocery store every once in a while. It's kinda hard to quantify which of Nekojiru's work I love the most. Not that there's any real need for it. There's so much good stuff, it sometimes makes it hard to parse. There's a couple in Nekojiru Taisen that get real close to what I believe is some of the best pages I've ever read. Like the aforementioned dog bullying story that ends up weirdly hitting close to home with some truly nightmarish pages near the end. From finding a beetle missing half of its body, to just this pitch black darkness for as far as the eye can see. Or Mackerel Tempura, where Nyako and Nyata use one of those old school insect preservation kits to kill 3 nearby vagrants for no reason. The comic where they meet Hideo Noguchi, the guy whose face is on the Japanese 1,000 yen bills, and how basically the whole deal leads up to him croaking in the middle of the street because our 2 protags got sidetracked by 10 yen popsicles and shit. Not gonna lie, it takes hella balls to write something like that. I could legit go on and on, but really, the comics that ended up attracting me the most are the ones where the fictional world takes a backseat for our world. You see, Nekojiru, the artist, has a tendency of portraying herself the same way she does with her characters. Small cat, big eyes, and a whole lot of cynicism. And truly, I think the comics where the real world bridges over to the fictional, or fictionalized, are my faves out there. Like 2 of her books are effectively condensed version of travel journals, taking the time to describe in detail some of the frankly wild experiences she's lived while on trips to visit India and Nepal with her husband. Train rides in cramped spaces, getting scammed by tourist traps, learning of other people's customs, heritage, and rights, spending the day in bed because you got sick, having the most frightening of bad trips, eating chapati in a sadhu's tent, and smoking a lot, and I mean a whole lot of weed. Basically all the cornerstones of spending a few weeks in a foreign country. I brought up earlier Nekojiru's tendencies for portraying folks as exactly what she sees of them, and while it's absolutely not omitted from those 2, you can definitely tell there's a certain amount of respect, or at least what I think is genuine interest given to other people's cultures. It never goes out of its way to feel particularly edgy, caricaturesque, or reflecting any actual heinous worldviews. Plus, let's be real, 99% of the time her husband ends up looking way worse for wear than practically anyone else she draws. Similarly, one of my absolute favorite work of hers is also a compilation of sorts. Jiru Diary, where you get the privilege to witness 1 entry per month of Nekojiru's daily life and whatever events happened around her. I know it sounds a little bit vague to describe it not exactly as a retelling of her days, but rather as a collection of quote-unquote weird things happening in the background, but that's legit how it feels sometimes. Only a few pages in and you learn of her almost supernatural ability to attract folks who shit in public. Absolutely wild. That sort of month-by-month diary format isn't anything special, but in a way, it kinda helps bridge the gap between Nekojiru the character and Nekojiru the artist. It's just incredibly endearing to get that sort of insight into what makes someone tick. The inner workings and machination of what goes on between Nekojiru and her husband on the very few off days they get. Whether that be winning Final Fantasy VI through a Shonen Jump contest, only to subsequently miss out on that game because she wasn't there for the delivery, or all the Dragon Quest references she keeps inserting in her stories, even the sheer amount of time she brings up Aphex Twin and his music is incredibly infectious. If you thought I was joking in last vid about Nekojiru saying the dude owns, you got the confirmation right here. Certified freak for that donkey rhubarb. Even addressing the dude by first name basis. Only going to live shows to catch a glimpse at his face. As a matter of fact, there's the exact performance she went to available on YouTube right now. The one at Fuji Rock in '97, where Richard played the whole gig in this tiny house set, a swag I can only ever hope to achieve. The whole vid could be me literally just reading this shit out loud for 35 minutes nonstop, but I ain't about that life. At least, not entirely so. Instead, I have a couple of them, on me, doubling as the usual Patreon segment. When my husband was rushing to make a deadline, I started saying, "Hey, suppose I die, donate my body. They say that my eyes and organs will be taken away all at once, and my body won't even come back for 2 years. I kept on talking. Finally he became angry and said, "No, I'll cremate you." There was a big typhoon coming, so all night long they kept broadcasting the weather map. There was calming music playing in the background. There wasn't any sense of urgency. The mood became bleak, but it was like a video game, so I kinda liked it. When I was a kid, I was given some orange-colored liver drops at kindergarten. We were supposed to take 1 per day, but I took 100 of them and then something that looked like orange soup came out of me in the bathroom. Then I was put in isolation by some quack who diagnosed me with dysentery. When I was in high school during gym class, this girl wrinkled up her face and burst out crying. I asked her what was wrong. She said her boyfriend died in front of Jonathan's on his motorcycle. "What's Jonathan's?" I asked, and through her tears she responded, "A family restaurant." When I got back from India, I was quarantined because I contracted a legally designated infectious disease. I was the only patient in a huge isolation ward. Every day I would dazedly watch TV about the Aum Shinrikyo attack. I started to get dizzy and thought, it would be better if I could just spend my whole life in isolation. I saw a strange object flying in the sky. It was a reverse L that glowed as it moved. Nobody around me noticed it at all. Then many months later, I saw a similar shape. This was a square-shaped object. When my husband was really busy, I asked, "Hey, when Yansuke dies, can we have him stuffed?" He looked annoyed, but nevertheless, I persisted. "Is it okay?" "Hey, it's alright, isn't it?" My husband got angry and said, "No way, we're burning him!" Now that's all said and done, I think it's finally time to talk about nekojiru. I know that technically it might be a little gauche to be over 30 minutes into a video and only really now starting to get into the meat of things, but what can I say? I can't help but think of all the folks who whined about 5-minute intros being too long before. They're probably seething right now. And look, before we start, I still call it nekojiru rather than its localized name cat soup. 1, because I'm a massive weeb, and 2, because that was the name I became familiar with when I watched it for the first time. It kinda just stuck like that since then. Though I guess that sentiment's kinda fitting, knowing that nekojiru is one of those movies that kinda just does that. Sticks with you in a way that's really hard to describe, but maybe that's for the better. The first time I've sat down to watch it, I couldn't have been older than my mid to late teens, and despite over a decade going by since then, it still manages to evoke emotions in me so strong that my latest rewatch pretty much kickstarted this whole project. The entirety of Nekojiru's body of work has always been near and dear to my heart, but Nekojiru especially. It had the chance of being the perfect gateway into her stuff. Extremely short runtime, surrealistic visuals, barely any dialogue, and by the end, you're kinda just left there, alone, trying to piece it all together, trying to find some words to describe even a fraction of it. For that alone, it'll forever hold a special place in my heart. And honestly, I think many do too for those exact same reasons. A lot of folks ended up going into this movie without the prior knowledge that it's basically this giant consolidated love letter to an artist's entire career. Less concerned about conventional framing devices and storytelling, but a whole lot more focused on beautifully illustrating a couple of sequences inspired by many smaller ones you could find in Nekojiru's stories. The exact type of movie where, 10 years ago, people asked rhetorically if the animators were on drug while making it. Which, by the way, they weren't, got the confirmation from the actual director here. It's this pure display of animators just letting loose creatively and not feeling the pressures of limits or restraints. Trying to accurately summarize the movie's plot for a YouTube video feels almost antithetical to how it made me feel in the long run. The whole thing's just a little over half an hour, and frankly, more than speaks for itself. All of Nekojiru's work can be described like that. Even if I don't go into any sort of spoilers, nor do I think it would really matter all that much with the sort of experience it is, I'd rather have folks watch it by themselves and experience it fully unrestrained from such a generic practice as telling you exactly what happens on the screen for the rest of this vid. To give a small bit of context though, because that might be handy going forward, Nekojiru features the two protags we're accustomed to, superimposed on a world that's noticeably darker. I mean, the entire thing kicks off with the implication that Nyako died from a fever, and her soul's being taken away to the land of the dead by some sort of spirit shaman. Nyato only making it in time to retrieve half of his sister. Thus it's up to him to brave this dark and austere world in the hopes of getting the other half back. His journey taking him from one end of the living world all the way to the depths of the unknown. The entire movie conveys a truly oniric atmosphere through and through, and really manages to strike that sort of childish feeling of wonder, of being presented with so many unique sights and sounds. Surrealism injected into every aspect, from the backgrounds, the designs, to even each animation technique dutifully stretched to their absolute limits. It's a familiar kind of fever dream, with each succession of events snowballing into each other, giving the whole thing an almost collage sort of feeling. Like the sort of dream you get as a kid, where it's constantly teetering on the edge of nightmarish, where you're not exactly sure if it's ever gonna end. But honestly, it's not like you really mind all that much. Produced in 2001 by JC Staff, Nekojiru So is basically this giant love letter not just to Nekojiru's art, but also to animation as a medium. The thing was helmed by some pretty big names in the industry, thinking specifically of Tatsuo Sato's work as a director and Masaki Yuasa as animation director. Production roles in the anime industry and what each of them entails in the long run tend to be kept relatively vague and usually change drastically from gig to gig, so don't take that as an indication of anything other than the quality of those two's prior works. Both Sato and Yuasa are absolute juggernauts of the industry and legit extremely talented folks. The former known for Martian successor Nadeshiko and its incredibly stylish, almost cyberspacian looking movie, while the latter I typically associate with the production of Studio 4C's Noiseman Sound Insect. I guess it's a bit telling that I recognize Yuasa's fingerprints on stuff like that rather than the admittedly way more popular and semi-recent Devilman Crybaby, but once you notice his touch, it's really hard not to see it in pretty much everything he's worked on. The guy's got a very peculiar style. Also, the Chibi Mariko-chan connection from earlier comes back swinging full speed, since the dude also worked heavily on a lot of its incarnation over the years. To be fair with those two, it'd be a lot easier to talk about what they didn't work on, since their hands have graced more than your fair share of anime, and having them on board for a movie as special as Nekojiru So only serves to heighten my love for it. I don't need to repeat the whole style is substance speech from the Hilux video for you to get the idea that the visuals did a lot more for my burgeoning brain at that age than I could have potentially expected, to the point where even to this day, I can't really say I've quote-unquote gotten Nekojiru So. Nor do I think it's even all that important for the sake of loving something, appreciating it in all of its facets. The idea that the meaning of a certain piece of art can change drastically from person to person is a huge reason as to why I watch so many people talk about their own favorite interest, and I assume it's the same reason why you're sitting here watching my stuff too. Despite some body of works having clear notions and messages and whatnots, it's rarely ever the penultimate goal by the author. Ursula K. Le Guin said it best: "The complex meanings of a serious story or novel can be understood only by participation in the language of the story itself. To translate them into a message or reduce them to a sermon distorts, betrays, and destroys them. This is because a work of art is understood not by the mind only, but by the emotions and by the body itself." Plus, in the end, all that stuff is so extremely subjective, very much a eye of the beholder situation, where what you personally got out of something might not exactly align with either the creator's own vision or other people's very different interpretations. And honestly, I think there's something really cool about that, intended or otherwise. Whenever I find myself thinking back on the movie, I don't really think of its meaning, whatever that could even be, but more so about how it arrived at just the right time in my life, how it connected with me in all of its abstraction. And whenever that happens, it's almost instantly met with the realization that the right time is just now. No matter how many times I rewatch it, the perfect time has always been now. It's a piece of art that grew alongside me, my understanding and love for it, not exactly offering drastically different insights on subsequent rewatches, but instead allowing me the time to think back on my own position regarding it, and in turn the world itself. A funny little anecdote about Nekojiru So that I think a lot about is in the movie's interview with Tatsuo Sato. Not only is it incredibly interesting and helps flesh out what their goal was with the project, but also it sheds a little bit of light on the movie's title. Nekojiru So's name comes from a plant, or more commonly, grass, rather than the previously used convention of food names. The tentative titles for the OVA were stuff like Nekojiru Cha, like ocha, green tea, and Nekojiru Soba for noodles. Both of these were described as feeling more so like parodies of Nekojiru's art instead of something that could stand on its own. The movie puts a lot of emphasis on water and flowers, almost linking that idea to the title itself. Following that comment about parody, it had me thinking about how many of the ideas shown within the movie are taken directly from previous works, or even a dream diary Nekojiru used to keep. Despite many of the story's major elements being taken literally from those pages, they don't really feel the same this time around. The overall mood seems a lot more low-key, a lot more ominous, but weirdly calm in its inherent darkness, as if it was the end of a very long journey. Strangely, it makes me feel as if each story that Nekojiru wrote slowly converged onto each other, mixing recurring ideas, themes, characters, and settings to become something entirely new, still as beautiful as ever, but in a completely different way. It doesn't shy away from being weird like it always did, far from that. Like even without her soul intact, Nyako will still get up to help her brother beat up a poor defenseless pig. Both of them are still very much up to their own little shithead antics, but they're portrayed in an almost forlorn, weirdly melancholic sort of way. The movie's thematic elements calls attention to how they're kinda at the mercy of the strange world surrounding them, and whatever happens to inhabit it, rather than the manga's more "we're fucking shit up, get out of our way" attitude. Here you can feel a tangible sense of danger aimed at those two kids. It feels distinctively different than the world usually portrayed in Nekojiru's works. Sato described the movie as a sort of parallel to the manga, not exactly like the original, but similar in some aspects. More so, they were interested in showcasing a vision of what they personally saw in Nekojiru's work, what cocktail of emotions they could have gleaned from a cat's unblinking eyes. And I don't know why, but that shit just hits a weird spot for me. If you're familiar with Nekojiru, you've probably seen this part coming way ahead of time, but this is where we're gonna have to talk about some pretty heavy stuff. Unfortunately, in 1998, Chiyomi Hachiguchi passed away from suicide. That's about as far as I want to go with this information. I don't really want to use this fact to drive forward the emotional core of this video and try to cheaply evoke some emotion into its audience. Nor would I feel particularly good about making a quick buck out of someone's death. She deserves better than to be treated like a martyr, or have her misfortune scrutinized as needless speculation bait. I just feel like it was important to bring it up here, because in a way, it affected and continues to affect me on the daily. One night, many years ago, in very similar circumstances as the one I was in when I first smoked nekojiru, I sat alone to watch this documentary, very bluntly called The Death of Nekojiru. I wouldn't blame anyone spotting the title of this whole thing, and immediately thinking that it probably tries to explain or rationalize the whys, but nah, it's not interested in showing that whatsoever. Instead, it's this very respectful 40-something minutes long conversation about herself, the folks she's touched in her living, and the many in-betweens. The thing's a lot more preoccupied with being this sort of tribute to Nekojiru, rather than a piece centered exclusively around her passing. Which, to be quite honest, feels like the only right way to approach a topic like this. It's a bunch of people expressing their thoughts and anecdotes regarding what is probably one of the most influential underground artists Japan had in the 90s. But most excruciatingly, most importantly of all, it's about a bunch of people trying to process their collective grief about a friend, a loved one. It's this weird feeling that never really goes away, but slowly morphs over time. It never outright gets easier, but you slowly start to notice it less. The documentary isn't there for you to learn more about her art or any behind-the-scenes trivia, nor do I really think it was the goal, all things considered. It's there to share a little bit of insight regarding the humanity behind it all. There's this bit fairly early on that sees Hajime Yamano describing Nekojiru as someone who thought of tonkatsu as just a dead pork's body. It's stuff that everybody kinda instinctively knows. Like, of course the food you eat comes from somewhere. But if someone just randomly blurts that out to you, completely out of nowhere, it kinda makes you reflect, right? Despite the small bits of info we can take from her mangas and general anecdotes shared within them, Nekojiru's own life is something that's very rarely discussed when talking about her art. Part of that, no doubt, is because of the general understanding that she didn't enjoy getting all that social with people. She tended to stick to her own little corner and do stuff the way she saw fit. A lot of the folks present in this documentary, her husband included, spoke of her as if she was some kind of alien, someone who didn't see the world like others did. Reclusive, idiosyncratic, oftentimes very difficult to deal with, are all terms interchangeably used to describe her and how she seemed to other people. A couple of comics in the Jiru Jiru diary corroborate those statements, like how she didn't really bother with being polite no matter where she found herself or who she was talking to, saying stuff as she saw them to a degree of bluntness that verged on her almost getting kicked out of restaurants. She's been described as vehemently avoiding eye contact with people at all cost, one time meeting her colleague's gaze only to ask him outright if he wanted to die. On the first time meeting that dude too! Similarly, there's this article by one of her closest friends, Yoshiaki Yoshinaga, called Memories of Nekojiru, which was published after her passing, that nearly repeats that same story, but this time, completely unpromptedly telling a friend he would die at 35. Despite sounding harsh at times, I truly believe that everyone present in this documentary cared for Nekojiru tremendously, and the way they speak about her with a certain air of kindness only reinforces that thought. It's incredibly poignant to see a bunch of people simply cherishing the oddity that came from such a unique person. as if her being in a world of her own where only a select few could peer inside wasn't seen as anything all that bad, but just something they accepted as is. You know, it's weirdly hopeful in that sense, that there's folks out there who really do care. I think a lot about the scene where her brother talks about her, when he mentions that she went out of her way to make sure he always felt included as a kid, despite her technically preferring to be left alone. You can tell it's never done out of a begrudging desire to appease a parent by letting your younger sibling tag along for the day, but instead out of this genuine understanding for one another's place in the world. It would have been way too easy for this whole thing to slide into the territory of needlessly comparing their relationship to the one Nyako and Nyata share in the mangas, but I'm really glad the documentary doesn't try to pull that shit. Treating her work as some sort of clue as to how her brain works would have been genuinely disheartening. Another statement that particularly stuck with me was where this woman said, after talking of Nekojiru's desire to stop being a mangaka altogether and just move to India with her husband, I imagine she completely understood the truth of this world, so she chose to leave it. Particularly rough pill to swallow with that one. I think really the entire thing is, but especially the last couple of minutes. There's this moment where Yamano's talking about his own feelings regarding her passing, about how if she was still there, she'd be hounding his ass for even bothering to think about the what-ifs and what-nots, calling him stupid and all that. Pretty heartbreaking, but fitting end for a documentary like this. Slowly rolling credits over Aphex Twins number 3 left me in this cold room with uncountable tear stains on my shirt, wondering if it's okay to mourn someone I never knew. You know, I stumbled upon her work at an age that was still fairly impressionable. Nekojiru So's visuals especially leaving a massive crater-like impact on how I'd see art for the rest of my life. Though at that same time, I was also very much unaware of what exactly I was even searching for. The vibes were certainly a key aspect, but a lot of it was lost on me. The social commentary, the tongue-in-cheek edgy humor, all of that were stuff I enjoyed through multiple rereads and rewatches. When it did eventually click with me, Nekojiru's work had gone from something unreachable in my eyes to something way too relatable. That sort of deep look into the human mind, its primal aspect and tendency for amoral cruelty. Said like that, I think one could assume that the art insists on shoving its views into its audience face, but no, it never really feels forced or ham-fisted. Instead, it's presented in this very low-key way, almost as if to say, these are just my thoughts, make of them what you will. Which, to be quite honest, that's more than something to strive for. Her stories are very much nothing elaborate, just pure extensions of her thoughts. But in the mundanity of their look, or the way they choose to present even the most basic of information as a forceful slap to the face, it feels alluring like nothing else out there. Right at the end of Nekojiru Udon, there's this drawing by her colleague, Takashi Nemoto, that's been rotating in my brain for as long as I can remember. In this extremely eta-uma style full-page illustration, are characters featuring relatively gruesome-looking cutouts used as faces. Very surreal stuff, completely disconnected from any context. The first time I saw it, it kinda made me pause for a second and ruminate on it. Not exactly because of its imagery, though that's defo part of it, but rather because of the dialogue left in there. In a corner is written this short excerpt. The honest Nekojiru, seeing through others' facades and into their true nature, followed by an addendum reading, Yamano sees through them too, but he's the more well-adjusted of the two. There's this memory of a particularly cloudy day back when I was a kid that's lingered on in the back of my head for the longest time. It was around 3:30 in the afternoon, at school. The bell had just rang and everyone was scrambling to pack their bags and get the fuck out of there. I was still sitting at my desk, kinda absent-minded, when this girl from my class walked right in front of it and just stopped. I wasn't particularly familiar with her. I wasn't particularly familiar with any of my classmates, but her especially. We didn't talk or even had any friends in common. I doubt she even knew my name, really. She was a popular kid, and I was extremely timid. Stayed in my own little corner, away from folks, rarely ever talking. But for some unknown reason, that day, she chose to walk from the very back of the class where her desk and friends were situated, all the way to mine in the very front, right next to the window in quite literally the opposite direction as to where the exit door stood. As soon as she arrived, without a moment of hesitation, she slammed the ever-loving shit out of her palms into the wooden topside of my desk, sending my heart into an absolute frenzy state before rapidly descending into the deepest pit of my stomach. Before I could even say a thing, not that I really would've since I kept myself practically mute back then, she said, and I'll always remember, "Your eyes look empty, like you're constantly staring far away, disconnected from reality, from everyone around you. It makes me sick." I don't know if she was expecting a reply, but that day, the walk back home felt a whole lot longer than usual. Ever since I was a kid, I've always felt different than others. Not in this egocentric, self-aggrandizing way, mind you, but more so like I felt bad. Really fucking bad about myself. Not for any concise reason I could pinpoint, but it felt as if something was wrong with me. The way I reacted to or interacted with folks, the way I saw things differently than others. It was like everything in life was moving either too fast or too slow, never a just in between. To many, I was what you could describe as an overly emotional child. I cried a lot, more often than not. Never really sure as to why I did. Maybe it was kind of a natural gut reaction to feeling so overwhelmed all the time. To add on to that, I was an extremely sheltered kid. Didn't have many friends, nor did I go out a lot. Maybe part of that is my own fault. I sure as hell didn't feel the need to go out when inside felt safe as is. What more could I ask for when I spent all my waking moments by myself, surrounded by toys and the loving warmth of a TV screen? Even to this day, my skin has this weirdly discolored look to it. Got the exact shade of a freshly poured glass of milk. Around my teenage years, I started giving up on real-life social interactions because I generally thought them to be too hard. The idea that societal life expected me to simply put my feelings aside and do some 4D chess type shit to get even the most basic point across felt weird. Like, I don't know. When someone asks you how you're doing, do you tell them the truth or do you just say, "I'm fine," before asking them the same rhetorical question? None of it felt worth the hassle, so I started to slowly replace real-life interactions with ones I could find within the comfort of my own home. Being online, spending hours upon hours on YouTube, forums, and anonymous message boards felt somewhat easier, like a smokescreen for the emotionally distraught. The very little confidence I developed by then had always felt like this continuous game of tug-of-war, rapidly oscillating between God's gift to humanity and absolute fucking depths of misery. I didn't know all that much back then about things like gender dysphoria or being on the spectrum. I just felt like there was something bad, something deeply and upsettingly wrong going on within me, that I was the only one able to see that I was rotting from the inside out. Even to this day, it's hard to shake the feeling, you know? Not being able to relate to people, even when trying the best you can, is absolutely soul-crushing. Even the folks I'd consider the closest I have to friends still feel separated by this giant impenetrable barrier. Having to constantly prime myself, sometimes for days before hitting them up via DMs, feels dire. It's this all-encompassing sense of isolation, of not being able to connect with anyone on any sort of level. Not out of lack of trying or even desire, but rather out of inability to meaningfully understand each other, even if only on surface level. It's genuinely alienating to the point where sometimes I struggle to feel human. After all, it's not like I'm really anything tangible to you, the viewer. I'm just a disembodied voice coming right from your speakers, your headphones. Someone, something, but also not really. You know, I talk about this as if it was all stemming from the distant past, but really, those feelings haven't gone anywhere. I'm left to grasp with the idea that I'm this broken adult who feels eternally trapped somewhere around age 14. Sometimes I can't help but feel like I've accidentally developed some form of disjointed misanthropy, like purely antisocial behavior, not by desire, but by sheer circumstances. When you're alone for this long, your social skills tend to slowly go away, and the anxiety building onto that makes you just straight up avoid any sort of contact. Not hating people per se, but fearing the implications that come with the human experience. Like a hermit crab leaving shell after shell behind, only ever able to enjoy other people's presence at an arm's length. I think what sticks out the most to me out of Nekojiru's art is that feeling of relatability. You know, for someone who is described as deeply antisocial at best, and borderline misanthropic at worst, she really manages to hit a certain point in her writing where emotions are conveyed so strongly, it's almost impossible not to find something to relate to. Not to get too parasocial here, as if this video wasn't already enough at this point, but it's defo humbling to some degree to see someone exhibit similar traits to yours and still be able to achieve some modicum of success out there. Speculating on an artist's mental health can get more than a bit dicey. It's oftentimes invasive, so it's defo not the goal here, I don't think one needs to know someone's personal life to deem whether or not they're qualified to talk about whatever the fuck they want to talk about. It's okay for dark themes to be presented that way, and it shouldn't require creators to actually rip the proverbial band-aid off their trauma and publicly announce it to the world for their work to be allowed a place in society. Same for the folks who choose to indulge in that sort of art. Sometimes, reading something that fucks you up in just the right way is the perfect avenue for recentering with life, to understand your place in it better. And God fucking knows Nekojiru didn't hold back on talking about that sort of stuff. It's no secret she was absolutely overworked as shit. It totally shows, through stories talking about how both her and Yamano could never turn a job down, to just the sheer amount of stuff they've pumped over their careers. It's downright bleak. I've never been a fan of the idea that an artist has to be tortured to produce anything worth it. Like, I don't know, having a shitty childhood myself doesn't mean more than just that. A shitty childhood. Not a funny story, a joke, or even a punchline, but instead just trauma I gotta lug around on my shoulders for the rest of my life. That's a huge part as to why I take umbrage with the idea that you have to be mentally exhausted to create something. It's weirdly mean to think so, and a stereotype I see getting parroted all the time, especially about artists that have already passed. Though at the same time, it'd be irresponsible of me to say that shit didn't affect Nekojiru's work deeply. Her art exemplifies perfectly a certain vertical slice of Japan's era, specifically talking here about the post-economic, post-bubble era of the 90s, sort of general period of ace anxiety. The economy's going to shit. The grand idealist of yesteryears couldn't have foretold that the world of tomorrow wasn't as great as some made it out to be. The world is stuck in an uncertain state. The 1991 otaku murder happened, and the moral panic dictates that the regulation of what can or can't be shown in manga have to be tightened. Same for the Aum Shinrikyo and the sarin gas attacks, something that Nekojiru herself would reference a couple times. Even in the video game landscape, that stuff's been pretty prevalent. Take for example Suda Goichi talking about it during the development of Moonlight Syndrome. The idea was that fear was no longer just this vague boogeyman, but actual real people doing real fucked up things. That era is also synonymous with the commodification of the internet, and with that came a whole wave of kids being drastically desensitized by whatever happened to land on their lap.
WTC に火の玉が突っ込んで2843の人間が地獄行き。その光景はあまりに美しく、僕はビール片手にテレビに釘付け。すべてが気違いじみている。だから僕は瓦礫の下の死体を覗く、死体を覗く、死体を覗く、死体を覗く、死体を覗く、死体を覗く、死体を覗く。
Pretty heavy quote from one of my favorite movies, Peep TV show, that plays entirely into this segment's idea, that sort of post-Y2K social malaise. I mean, a bit on the nose, but the movie literally opens up on a guy jacking off over footage of 9/11, so, you know, let that be a testament to what sort of vibe I'm going for here. The whole movie is this very poignant story of apathy, nihilism, and ennui. It's hard to look forward to tomorrow when you know it's just gonna be more or less the same as yesterday. It's about a couple of young folks, numbed by the violent news of everyday events, looking for the quote-unquote real on a violent, voyeuristic website. What attracted me the most to it is simply how it touches on the search of identity in youth, specifically through the lens of nationalism and extreme ideologies that said youth tend to spiral into. You know the weird pipeline that goes from edgy jokes to R9K level shit? Concepts like identity, perception, and impression are topics I'm hella passionate about when it comes to art. A lot of the stuff I find myself gravitating to tend to speak, or at least touch upon the fact that identity is something infinitely complex, both inwards and outwards. Though I think Peep TV show comes the closest to explaining how I feel about perception, and how that can feel like this giant burden on one's shoulders. And really, that shit can end up fucking you over in the long run. When other people's image of you start taking form, and becoming something you, yourself, don't want to see, it ends up kind of robbing you of your own sense of agency regarding identity itself. The whole "they're just like me for real stuff can be funny at first, but that sense of relatability is pretty vague all things considered. You're only ever presented with one side of the coin. Can't really see more than what folks are willing to let on, you feel? It kinda beats the purpose of trying to pinpoint or psychoanalyze someone through their art. So all you're really left with is this weird feeling inside, like this sinking sensation in the pit of your stomach, as if you're seeing something just a little too close for comfort. something too uncannily relevant to your own life circumstances. But at some point, even all that becomes noise, static emanating from power lines. Like when you're talking to folks and it feels like no one's really listening. It feels like running against the wind, screaming your lungs out and hoping that someone, anyone, notices. Everyone's too busy staring, not helping, but rather just looking in disbelief that someone like that could be causing such a ruckus in a public space. Not sympathy, not empathy, just vacant stares. I think a lot about that, specifically the ending of Shozen Fukui's 964 Pinocchio, where he's just yelling, help me, over and over, asking why nobody's helping. And it's like, damn. I don't know why, but it hits in a weird spot. The pains that come with success are rarely ever discussed in this space, and I find that kinda weird. Like I mentioned earlier that Nekojiru is overworked as shit, couldn't even turn a job down, and it makes me wonder in turn if I'll end up like that someday, on the same road as her. I mean, it's not exactly a well-hidden secret that I end up pulling 12-hour workday crunch style on average on pretty much every vid I've made so far. It's not ideal for sure, but popularity, especially large amounts of the unexpected kind, kinda just does that to you. God fucking knows I've been in a weird funk ever since I've started having to delete comments each day, making fun of my accent, of my lisp, the way I speak, or just random insults. It's draining to be perceived by others constantly. People won't talk about that stuff because it's deemed ugly or selfish. But I'm not like other people. I have empty eyes. I speak like a goddamn shonen protagonist. I'm passionate, eccentric, weird even. I don't want to be a relatable image, a marketable personality. I want to scream on every rooftop, I'm not like you for real. I'm just me, ever juggling between the throbbing desire of being forgotten and the fervent need to be remembered. My mind always wanders back to Invisible, the posthumously released comic based on the very last dream diary entry Nekojiru wrote before her death. It's illustrated by Hajime Yamano, and kinda feels like the closest I'll ever get to describing my feelings in general. The story starts off with Nekojiru waking up, brushing her teeth and staring at the rain outside of her house. A bridge separates her town from the other side of the road, a shore far away covered in mist, only reachable by this large suspension bridge. No one's ever been seen crossing it before, and neither has she. She wanted to go but felt scared, until one day, the temptation grew so strong she physically couldn't resist the urge. About halfway through the bridge, she sees this shadowy figure following behind her. As it gets closer, she comes to realize that it is her in the distance. And as she turns around to face herself, the doppelganger seems to phase through her, as if she wasn't there in the first place. Being frightened by the experience, she returns home only to be met with someone else. A large clown inviting her to turn invisible, telling her that if she stands still every day, her body will slowly turn see-through. And the more she repeats this, the less she'll be a person of this world. Slowly but surely, severing her connection like he has in the past. For the next couple of days, she practices going invisible, sometimes met with a clown cheering her on. People slowly stop noticing her. She continues practicing and slowly fading away until someone, a neighborhood friend, comes to stop her, telling her she shouldn't do that. She keeps doing it anyway. One day the clown brings a friend along, an invisible person just like him, he says. And the comic ends with Nekojiru, the man and the clown slowly fading out of existence, as if they were never there in the first place. There's a certain honesty to her art, a lack of tact that really appeals to me. That way of saying that even the unpleasant parts of life are simply that, parts of a greater deal. I think a lot of people tend to avoid that sort of topic by fear of bringing the mood down, but to me it feels relatable. Painfully so even. Her art gives me hope that someday mine will find people who feel similarly. Nekojiru's entire ensemble of work doesn't scream a through line, nor does it need to. It outright refuses to be categorized. Each page, line, sketch is a simple view into how she, herself, saw the world and chose to speak about it. A world viewed through two unblinking eyes. And in those eyes, I saw mine. I don't really have a grand gesture sort of end speech ready to go, trying to instill some hope into everyone watching this like, everything's gonna be okay in the end. I don't think I have it in me this time around. Sometimes seeing someone going through it feels cathartic, right? Maybe it's enough for some folks to realize they're not all that alone out there. For me, it's a little complicated. I closed the door tonight, closed the lights, blast Aphex Twin's April 14th just a little too loudly, fuck the neighbors, Eyes closed, deep breath. Maybe I won't open them again, who knows? But for now I just think to myself, I wonder if it hurts to disappear.